Welcome to today's webinar. So this one is how to build a financial and business case for migrating to AWS. So this is part 2 of a 3-part series. My name's Andrew Rigg. I'm a cloud solution architect at Perfect Image, and my focus is around public cloud, specifically Microsoft Azure 365 and AWS. Please at any stage ask questions and I'll try to answer as we go, but we'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session. So who are we? So Perfect Image is a managed service provider located in the northeast of the UK. We're a consultancy-led business with over 80 IT professionals with a focus on IT infrastructure, business intelligence, and managed services. So there's a lot to pack into 45 minutes today. So what we're going to cover is how to build your business case. So we'll break this down into sections, including why establishing a business case is important, the types of business cases, TCO and the business case, and business case and tooling processes. We'll then move into the kind of planning the migration phase. So this is broken down into define, build, plan, ready, adopt, govern, and manage. So just before we get into the business case, just a quick why public cloud. So a more cynical engineer or private cloud provider may tell you that public cloud is just somebody else's computer on the internet. While this is true to a degree, it's the technology that's laid upon this is what makes public cloud, the public cloud offerings so compelling. There are many reasons why you should use AWS as your cloud provider. I'll cover my top 8 reasons. So starting with agility, whether it's expanding your current environment into the cloud, if you've got resource constraints for compute or storage, or even the seasonal demands. The ability to have your environment automatically scale when your users or customers require it. Don't pay for those idle resources. So data center consolidation, consolidate physically separated systems into a single logical public cloud estate while maintaining the geographic data locations for compliance. No more hardware life cycles. You don't need to scope out and future-proof. Acquisitions and short-term contracts. So timelines for procuring and deploying infrastructure changes from weeks or even months to days or hours. Intensive workloads. So bid for cheap compute. So non-time sensitive processes can be queued to run when cheaper compute becomes available. You get the flexibility to change your server types. So changing from general purpose VMs to kind of CPU, RAM, or even GPU optimized instances as your needs change. Backup disaster recovery. So advanced disaster recovery solutions can be achieved for a fraction of the cost, and it may have been once cost prohibitive if you tried to implement these within your own data centers. Cost reductions. Well, so this is where you have got multiple choices of how the workloads are consumed and built within public cloud. So you've got your on-demand, your pay-as-you-go. You pay for these as you consume. It gives you the most flexibility. But you pay most for these instances if they're running 24/7. You then kind of go into your reserved instances. So this is where you reduce the costs by making the commitment to the constant compute resource. Spot instances. So these are the ones for where you bid for unused server instances. So these can reduce the cost significantly, but these are the ones where your workloads need to be able to start and stop at any time of the day. You also get dedicated hosts. It's effectively where you rent a physical host, which is fully dedicated to running your instances. So you can either bring your kind of existing kind of per socket, per core, per VM software licenses to further reduce your costs. Then you get into savings plans. But these ones are like the reserved instances, but they give you much more flexibility. They start to then spread over into using serverless functions. Facilities, or real estate. So if you were running, if you're running your current workloads within on-premise data centers, that's a real headache for if you need to move locations. Once you're in public cloud, you can move offices with very limited changes required. Last but not least is information security. So in the past, people would often perceive cloud as being insecure. However, in public cloud, your data is encrypted at rest, your infrastructure is behind enterprise systems and firewalls for even the smallest of deployments. And your data sovereignty, well, you deploy in the region where where you need your data to reside. So part of the cloud migration strategy is to create a business case. So this provides the answers to the common questions that get asked if you just happen to start using a cloud provider, and it prevents some awkward questions like, why are we getting these bills? What workloads do we have running? Who approved this? It's actually quite common for companies to be in the cloud, utilizing public cloud resources and running critical business workloads before the business asks, what's our cloud migration strategy? Building a business case provides the answers to some of the to the questions on screen, and it feeds into the overall cloud strategy. There's two main types of business cases. So you've got directional and detailed. So directional is commonly used for budgetary purposes. It generally provides the costs within a 20% kind of plus minus of the final cost. Now, depending upon the size of your workloads, this could add or reduce cloud costs by tens of thousands per month. So directional it's a good starting point, and it will often move into a detailed business case well before any workloads are migrated. Iterate the business case. Don't go for perfection first pass. So when preparing and working through the business case, we often find more opportunities to drive efficiencies in the broader business. This creates the right environment required to accelerate innovation, increase productivity, and reduce overall risk. Along with the directional and detailed business cases, you also have different approaches and tooling available and associated to gather the information that supports the business case. So these tools are the manual and the automated approach. So the manual discovery typically includes using total cost of ownership calculators with assumptions, migration cost estimators, business value and financial analysis. So we also utilize the 6 R's for a high-level assessment for the workloads and applications. So more detail on what the 6 R's are kind of later in the slide deck. The manual process works fine for smaller workloads, of say 50 servers or under. For anything more, the automated approaches and tooling should be utilized. So AWS provides free tools as part of their migration hubs, such as the AWS Migration Evaluator. So this was formerly called TSO Logic. There's also plenty of other third-party products available. It will depend upon the size of your environment, and the detail required if these third-party tools are required. As you start to use the automated tooling, you now get the ability to start assessing the current workloads and resource requirements and build application dependencies to produce and plan migration groups. When assessing current individual server workloads, this tooling does the cost analysis and the recommendations for instances for cloud servers based upon the actual resource utilization. So during the discovery phase, we need to look at all costs and savings associated with the move to public cloud. When we look at these, some items will be cost for migrating, and others provides the savings with cost reductions. But we do need to identify all areas, as it's not just the hosting costs, the infrastructure costs that need to be taken into account. It's also about assessing the applications, the migration itself, people, and third-party costs. So I'll run through these sections quickly and pick on some of the considerations for each. My point here is there's actually quite a lot to consider. So starting with the infrastructure. So your data center costs, right? So you've got facilities costs, lease terms remaining. If you pull out of the data center, then what are those termination penalties? And you kind of go into the data center savings side. So no longer do you have the direct costs for cooling, backup, power, disaster recovery, duplicate sites, security and compliance. You may have a reduced footprint if you still do require a small environment. And you've got the connectivity, so no more leased lines to those data centers. Before we hit the servers, so this is where we've got to look at how many, the number of servers, are they physical, virtual, the specifications, CPU, cores, RAM, and then the applications installed on the servers. That's even before we hit kind of your storage, your SANs, your NAS, your kind of network connectivity, so that peak throughput required. Then we move into the next category, so the applications. So licensing considerations, right? So we need to consider existing licensing. Can these be transferred to kind of a public cloud environment? Upcoming license renewals, and then the move to Amazon Linux too. So remove the reliance on Microsoft licensing to further save money. Application requirements. So yeah, individual SLAs and applications, disaster recovery, high availability, ready training and compliance. But then we also do perform the 6 R's on each of these workloads. And I promise I will get to what the 6 R's are. Then you've got the actual considerations of the actual migration itself. So the planning, design, documentation, duplicate environments, the actual data migration. So your cutover and rollback plans. Then you kind of get to your migration velocity. Now this here is, so you kind of identify which apps can move the easiest. You want to be able to forecast the entire project timescale. The migration should be fast-paced and demonstrate a commitment to migrating all workloads. Then we get to our people costs. So, your direct people costs, so your employees. So recruitment, retention and replacement, training and development costs. Then you got the physical space, the equipment they require, services. Then you kind of get to the direct people costs for contractors. So again, you kind of have your recruitment and retention there, but then you got your cost per hour, per day, per week, per month. You still need that physical space to put them potentially, and whether you need to supply them with any equipment or services as well. Then we move on to third party. So this is where you kind of get to your contract related costs. Are there any fixed costs, maintenance charges? Are there any lock-in deals? Tools and lifecycle statuses. And then you got your software licenses. So any orchestration tools and management tools to get to the cloud. Activities including understanding time and motion. So that's probably enough about kind of cost considerations there. So I do realize I could have whipped through those, but to help answer some of the questions on how much it'll cost to host the servers in AWS versus the cost of doing nothing, that's when we can use the AWS migration evaluator. So that was TSA Logic. So I've got a short 5-minute demo kind of on how to show, I've got to show you why this is a powerful tool and kind of why you should use it when building your business case. So up on screen is basically the results of the collector. So the collector is agentless, either for virtual or physical servers. We can even ingest data exports from other systems. The purpose of the product is to provide us with the detail to help understand the workloads of each OS instance. By adding asset tags, so for assets, environments, applications, software entitlements, this increases the way the details displayed and made available. So the reporting is contextual. So so the information on the right will vary depending upon which node we click on the left. So this is helpful when trying to understand the specific workload and the potential costs. So what we've got, so we're in applications here, but now we've got process and payments. Now you see zombies mentioned a few times. Zombies are essentially servers that have no utilization over, so 100% non-utilization over the period of the data ingestion. So again, now we're over in environments. We can break down our environmental costs. So these are all currently our on-premise costs. So kind of what our GR costs are, our production costs. Now these costs are industry standard costs, or we can input kind of your costings into the calculator to kind of give those costs that are accurate to you. So once we kind of move on from the kind of usage and cost side of the on-prem, we then move to the cost modeler. So this is where we can start to build out scenarios for environments for what the costs are likely to be hosting an AWS on those environments. So we can either do it over the applications again. So, the customer service application, well, that cost me $200,000 per year to run on-prem. So we'll just go through a couple of these ones here. Now it gives you an idea of how many instances are included within these ones, but we'll stick to the environments for now for the high level overview of things. So wait for this one to load. what you're going to see is the cost there for to run our on-premise environment, all the servers, power, compute, disaster recovery, and it's represented here in pink on the chart. Well, I've also done kind of two other models here. So we've got our pay-as-you-go and we've got our 3-year all up front. And we'll use these for different scenarios. So here in the scenario is for our 3 years all up front payment model. Now the orange is represented by a direct match. So that's a like for like if we did a lift and shift. And the yellow is represented by the right sizing. So taking in actual utilization and going right. So instead of 2 cores, 4 cores, now you need 2 cores for that server. So we'll break these down into a bit more detail here. So we'll click on edit and we'll show you some of the variables that are available that build out this costing scenario. So first of all, we can pick our region. So and then the cost associated with that region. We have our purchase type. So we went with our 3 years all up front here. This is whether we need to include zombies or not. So typically the zombies, you don't want to migrate those to AWS. You will look at those further. Then we've got our kind of CPU. So do we want to consider AMD chips? When we go down to our storage, do we want hard drive? Do we want SSD? And our CPU scaling is if this process was run during a quieter time, we can add in effectively a buffer to say we need 120%. Then we get to our SQL licensing sides of things. So whether we want AWS to provide the licenses or whether we want to do a bring your own. So we'll just toggle the bring your own here and click save, and you'll see how this affects the costs associated with this scenario. So overall now for the entire environment, our cost is reduced for our all up front. So now we're well under 2 million per year for the cost because we got licenses that we can reuse. Now, the reserved instances probably doesn't work for all environments. It definitely works for the production environment. So you can see here for production, 600,000 versus 550,000. But the pay-as-you-go doesn't really work for a production environment. It will for some use cases, but it kind of more likely work for staging. So you can see here our cost of the current cost versus this cost here is that right-sized environment for pay-as-you-go. If we look at the DR environment, then yeah, you'd argue, well, hey, you don't need your DR environment running 8 hours per day, right? So currently the cost of DR is 165,000. If we quickly edit this policy or this scenario, and we'll change the hours that the DR environment is running, and we'll just bump it down to 2. So let's say on average 2 hours per day over the month. And we'll just go save. So now we can see this is updated here live. So the current cost hasn't changed. That's our on-premise cost. But now that the cost for running that DR environment is reduced to 78,000. So we'll quickly add another scenario. So this is the power here. You can build as many scenarios as required to kind of help you build out your case. So we'll pick our location. We're going to go with 1 year no upfront. So we want to pay monthly, but still benefit from the reduced pricing. We're going to stick with the pretty much most standards here. We'll bump up our CPU a little bit, give us some headroom. We're going to make AWS provide the licenses in this one because, hey, maybe we can't take our licenses with us. So we want to know how much will it cost if they provide the licenses. And we'll untick AMD for now as well. So we'll just go save on this one, and this will build out our new scenario. So now we've got our cost here for our 1 year reserved instances. Whoops, 1 sec. Let's go to our all environments. So, yeah, so we've got our cost now for our 1 year no upfront, our 3 year all upfront. Our 3 year all upfront does include the escrow licenses and our pay-as-you-go. So you can build out as many scenarios as you require to cost out what the likely costs are going to be. Just going to pause for a second. I'm just going to check if there's any questions on this one just before I move on. So one here, do I as a customer get access to this portal? Yes, so absolutely. You can see, you get to create, and you get to basically do everything that I get access to here. And another one is, can I explain zombies again? So the zombies are effectively servers that were idle 100% of the time for the evaluation was ongoing. So they're the prime candidates not to move to AWS or require more investigation. They may have a task that only runs at the end of the month, so you can't just go and go, okay, yep, I don't need to move those. Now the period for this to run over is typically between kind of 2 to 4 weeks. That's all we need to actually ingest the data for. So I've been asked, why not just complete a total cost of ownership, so a TCO review? Why should we complete the full business case? Well, the TCO is focused on a small piece, on a small period of time. So it's immediately after you go live with your cloud workloads. Before you reach the predicted TCO, you've got the migration bubble. So during the business case, you must make it clear that for a period of time, costs before you reach there will be increased costs before you hit the TCO. It's important not to extend your migration timeframes during the project beyond what was planned, unless there's very critical reasons doing this. The longer the migration bubble costs will be felt, and then this will push out the timelines for the kind of TCO and the payback period. So that migration bubble, it consists of the migration planning assessments, duplicate environments, staff training, kind of any migration consultancy, third-party tooling. So then next you kind of come to the TCO phase. So this is where the monthly costs are at the predicted spend. This comes, so after that comes the payback period, but this will depend upon the length of that migration bubble. But you shouldn't simply stop once you're in the cloud. So cost optimization should continue, and the more workloads you evolve, and the more you go cloud native, your cloud spend will also reduce. So there's more ways on how to optimize your cloud spend a bit later. So up on screen are the reasons why you should complete a business case, and not just a TCO. A business case, assessment can be as little as a few hours, but it can be as long as 10 weeks. The times are subject to having the right, access to the right information and the data available. So when looking at compute capacity in typical data centers, they're often only consuming about 45% of their capacity. When assessing the individual workloads, like we did with the TCO side of things, it's not uncommon to find that the resources are over-provisioned by more than 50%. It's partly because it's available, but it's also because assessing the on-premise workloads after the fact is rarely done. When you complete your design and capacity planning for on-premise estates, you have to plan, for your workloads and estimate your growth and plan for it at that point of purchase. You say, why not just add capacity later? Well, to start with, generally you won't have provision for this within your yearly budget. We could be talking hundreds of thousands of pounds or more for storage alone. When you compare this to public cloud, where you only pay for the virtual machines, storage, networking consumed, when you use the service, you no longer have the issues with capacity planning. Leave that to the cloud providers. So now we get to the 6 R's. So what are they? So I'll talk you through these and discuss how they're assessed. So you've got retain, first of all. So yeah, the workloads are kept in situ. They're not going to change. They stay as is. Retire, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to retire. You won't move the cloud, and it will not retain on-prem either. So rehost. So these are the ones where you're going to basically lift and shift your workloads, right? So you're going to be as a like for like from on-premise to cloud. It's the quickest way to get to the cloud. Then replatforming. So this is where your workloads move to clouds with some changes. So you may move from kind of a MS SQL on a VM to managed RDS. You may move from 2008 servers to 2019 servers. So you're replatforming the OS. Then you refactor. So these are where your workloads require significant re-engineering to kind of run kind of cloud native. And then repurchase. So these are ones that are candidates to move to a SaaS-based solution. You know, you may have on-prem Exchange, move to Exchange Online. So what's a common percentage for, you know, at the initial migration stage? Well, retain is typically about 10%. Retire, 5%. Rehost is your big one. So typically this is your lift and shift. 40% of the workloads at the migration stage will be done as a lift and shift. Replatforming, not far behind, 30%. Refactor and is only 5%. It's only 5% too because this is at that initial stage of migration. You'll refactor, you know, later on in the process. And repurchase, about 10%. So the big ones here are that kind of rehost and replatform. 70% of what you'll do will fit this category generally. So now we move into the planning phase, you know, to migrate to AWS. This is now where it blends kind of into your cloud migration strategy. Some of the common challenges businesses face and the reasons for developing a cloud migration strategy are as follows. You know, so legacy applications and the migration risks and challenges. You know, you've got years of intertwined and disparate systems. You know, trying to work out what those dependency mappings are. So outdated hardware and server room facilities. So if a refresh of the hardware is due, or you've got current capacity issues, and you've got no budget or desire to upgrade, mid-cycle. Local resource constraints. You know, so this can be due to legacy kind of distributed data center designs. You know, those typical growing pains, whereas a stopgap solution that was implemented, you know, without a clear plan, or you know, simply just reacting to that data growth. Slow response to business requirements. So this is where, you know, it can take weeks or months to provision new service, even if they're just, you know, virtual servers, because you have to provision the additional hardware first to kind of meet the requirements. And then you kind of hit your the lack of robust, you know, fast disaster recovery capabilities. So disaster recovery solutions can be very expensive, you know, if you do it yourself, especially if you have very low recovery point and recovery time objectives. So what is a cloud migration strategy? So when we break down what the full kind of cloud migration strategy is, it helps to understand, you know, what the migration involves. So, you know, we do need to build your business case. You know, we need to define that strategy. You've got to plan your migration. So you look at your team's strengths and their technical expertise. Migrate in phases. You know, it took Netflix close to 8 years to move from on-prem to cloud, but whilst allowing them to evolve their offering to their customer. I'll also cover kind of, you know, ready, adapt, govern, manage, and then lastly, underpinning all this is communication. You know, you shouldn't forget your employees when producing the cloud migration strategy. So documenting the cloud migration strategy helps stakeholders understand the business outcomes that the organization is pursuing by adopting the cloud. So number one, you know, define and document your motivations. You know, meet with stakeholders to document the motivations. Two, is document business outcomes. You know, engage motivated stakeholders to document specific outcomes before we move into developing the business case to validate the financial model that supports your motivations. And then number four is, you know, your first adoption project. So this will help align the motivations with the technical effort. So we're going to look a bit deeper into each of these now in the next few slides. So up on screen are the critical business events, migration triggers, and innovations to consider when moving to public cloud. So when engaging stakeholders across the business and discussing technology, it's important that everyone understands the benefits and your motivations for adopting cloud. When engaging the different stakeholders, document those desired outcomes, you know, across these categories. You know, Perfect Image would typically run a workshop with you, you know, but we also have various templates and documents to help capture the right information and help identify the business outcomes. And typical questions covered are, you know, what do you expect from your move to cloud? You know, what are you moving to the cloud? What's your short, medium, and long-term objectives? what are the risks that are being identified, and then kind of what are the applications and databases as part of that you've identified to move to the cloud. As we move into developing the business justifications, these are the common myths that are always brought up by somebody, and they need to be discussed and understood. A lot of these here are kind of around costs. The cloud is cheaper. Costs of the driver for a migration, OpEx versus CapEx. But cost shouldn't be the driver or focus for cloud. One of the main benefits of cloud is the agility and the innovation that comes with the agility. Don't simply lift and shift your workloads and stop there. Yes, you will have benefits from doing this, but doing this alone, it may cost you more. And if cost reductions was a driver for your adoption, and you haven't continued to optimize, assess your environment, and innovate by using cloud native resources, then you will not realize all the benefits from moving to public cloud. Then there's the security question, but I'll need well over 45 minutes alone to talk about this. But saying public cloud is not secure is simply not true. I would in fact argue the opposite. The controls that are available to your enterprise level, you could simply not normally afford to implement these if you're on-prem or in a private cloud, unless you're a FTSE 500, but then I'd still argue that the cloud has the edge. So when creating your first migration project, use clearly defined criteria and clearly specified, identified outcomes you want to achieve. It should align with your motivations for cloud adoption. Use the first project as a source of learning. Typical examples of initial projects tend to be around backup and disaster recovery. Start with those non-critical workloads, or if developing new applications and workloads, use a fail fast, learn faster approach. So now we move into the planning phase. So again, we've kind of got another 4 key areas on screen. So the cloud adoption plan kind of converts the aspirational goals of the cloud adoption strategy into actions. It helps guide technical efforts required and also aligns with the business strategy. So again, in the next kind of 5-10 slides, I'll kind of break these down into more detail. So we start with the rationalizing your digital estate, right? So this is the process of evaluating the assets to determine the best approach to hosting them, whether it be in the cloud or taking a hybrid approach. It's when we assess the workloads, we use the 6 R's for each application or workload. Rationalization can take place, kind of using the incremental approach, where the cloud strategy team selects the first applications to be migrated, and then selects kind of a mix of simple and complex workloads. Now, this is the recommended approach because by adding the complex workloads, you ensure you've not missed anything in the assessment and the proof of concept or proof of technology stages. Use the cost modeling from the AWS Migration Evaluator to forecast the costs for your prioritized workloads. And remember to always ensure that the hybrid is incorporated in all costing models. So you also need to consider the type of workloads in line with the 6 R's. If you're rehosting or replatforming, these will be kind of effectively existing workloads. Refactor and repurchase to a degree will fall into the new workloads category. Costs for all these need to be evaluated. So cloud computing is a technology shift, right? And it's a new set of skills required to support cloud solutions. There can be pushback from IT personnel who are from a traditional data center and kind of on-prem hardware estates. They feel concerned or worried that they won't have a job once you move to the cloud. But it's far from the truth. Just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean that it's all managed by the cloud provider. You must work with a shared responsibility model. If you don't have internal teams or your current teams don't have the right skill set now, this is when you engage with a partner as an incubator. And throughout the migration and the support stage, training plans are developed. This will either enable your business to be self-sufficient, or you can focus on your applications and continue to outsource the day-to-day management. So involve the entire business. So it's not just IT. Defining the successful cloud strategy also depends upon the users and the customer's experience. Cloud adoption will will impact everyone in the organization. They need to be prepared to contribute to the overall strategy, to ensure success for the adoption, and look for new ways the cloud can benefit their specific functional area. So business and IT should be equal partners in defining that cloud strategy. So cloud has an impact on all areas of the organization, and they should be driving the cloud strategy as well. Create that balance between speed, moving quickly, or control, or reducing risk by having teams accountable for adoption and governance. While cloud adoption team requires to execute the cloud adoption tasks, the governance teams ensures the processes and controls are implemented. Now, depending upon the size of the organization, it's not uncommon for one or more members to overlap in both teams. Then you hit your exit strategy, right? So the exit strategy outlines the considerations regarding extracting yourself from a cloud provider if you need to. While it's rare to move, kind of from cloud back to traditional data center hosting, the possibility needs to be considered. Some regulators even mandate an exit strategy. Now, the exit strategy per cloud service will differ, but moving from kind of your IaaS to IaaS workloads is thankfully simpler. And both Azure and AWS already have documented migration processes in place, and this can form part of your exit strategy. So you can break the adoption plan down into 6 points. So confirm that all prerequisites have been completed before you create your plan. Prioritize your first workload and establish initial adoption backlog. Identify which assets, either proposed or existing, are required to support those workloads. Review the rationalization decisions to refine the adoption path, so whether you can migrate or innovate. Establish rough timelines, right, for those release for the release plannings, based upon those initial estimates. So the governance models are designed with the vision of reaching a state that incrementally can build trust and confidence while achieving your business goals. So governance has 5 actionable disciplines that enables your organization to modernize and reach the business goals. So these are cost management, security baseline, resource consistency and management, identity baseline, and deployment acceleration. So corporate governance policies are formulated to detect potential problems. This enables the creation of balance between transformation, so evolving your business with digital transformation, and risk mitigation, so minimizing risk to business outcomes and performance. So change is more than adopting the technology. It's about adapting how you do business. Developing the cloud migration strategy allows us to align the business, the people, the technology, and the strategy to achieve those business goals with actionable, efficient, and partner guidance, to deliver fast results with control and stability. So that was a lot to jam in there for basically, for those kind of 4 quick areas of each there for the planning and breakdown. I'm going to start to kind of wrap up now, but just before I do, I'll touch on optimizing your cloud environment. So AWS does have native cost management and kind of right sizing recommendations built into their portal, that provide the cost and the breakdown at a resource level. But if you're after a detailed breakdown and the ability to report upon the cost, via departments, resources, and other tags, you may need to utilize another third-party kind of service that collects and analyzes the data with the integrations to the AWS API. So these are products such as kind of Vitana and Cloud Wisdom can help you achieve this. Now, optimization itself is a large topic, and next week I'm doing a webinar on optimizing your cloud costs. So if that's something that interests you, then keep an eye on that one. But just like the cost management portals, AWS also has the ability for policies to allow the cloud spend to be kept in check by firstly limiting what can be deployed. Before these policies can become created or proposed, you first need to answer a few questions. Based upon these, the policies can be developed, in line with your governance and your cloud teams to ensure the right balance is found. Who's responsible for the cloud budget? Are you going to allow the use of any service or resource? Will there be different policies for spend based upon internal use or a potential impact to the customer experience? So here's my wrap up and kind of key takeaways from this session. So create a cloud migration strategy. It's not too late. Define, plan, build, adopt, govern, manage, and communicate. Assess your cloud providers, right? So who you choose now may not be your cloud provider in 3 to 5 years. Build an exit strategy into your cloud migration strategy and your business case. Then manage, manage, monitor, deliver expected outcomes, ensure the cloud environment is secure, compliant, and in line with your governance model. Optimize, don't just stop at lift and shift. Understand, your costs and control your cloud spend. And then repeat, once you've created a cloud migration strategy, that's not the end. Evolve, iterate, and communicate. So Perfect Image is offering incentives and free consultations to support our customers develop their business case and their migration strategies. We'll typically have a chat with the issues you're facing, what you want to achieve and how we can help you fulfill your goal. Our job is to turn business problems into technical solutions. Right, so I hope today's webinar has given some insight into creating and kind of, in creating the business case and kind of then blending into that cloud migration strategy. So as I said earlier, next week I'm presenting the final part of the series, which is the optimize your AWS environment, reduce your costs and elevate performance. So I'm just going to do a quick check for questions before we wrap up. Okay, so I've got one here. Let me just have a look at this one here. So question is, I don't know where to start. We're using cloud services, but I don't know why we've chosen the current cloud provider or what the real strategy is. So to get into this part, I would need further information, but what we'll do is we'll contact you after the session and we'll set up a meeting to understand your current workloads, your requirements, and understand what your objectives are. But it isn't too late to build a strategy into this, and it should always be reviewed, updated and challenged to ensure that you achieve what your business requires. Public cloud changes so quick, it's rapid rate of change. What you implement now may be totally different within the next 24 to 48 months. There's another one here. I'm a heavy Microsoft user and all servers are Windows based. Should I only consider Azure or is AWS an option? So Perfect Image provides both AWS and Azure services and consultancy to our customers, we're quite unique in the sense that it will sometimes get me into trouble for not pushing the one vendor on you, because we always need to consider the requirements and what's best to fit you and your overall workloads and your goals. But the simple answer to your question is no, right? So by having the Microsoft workloads is not reason enough to only consider Azure. In fact, AWS has more Windows workloads running, running in AWS than Microsoft do in Azure, and it also offers hefty incentives to move your workloads, to AWS, and to go cloud native. So what needs to be done is to look at your objectives, the goals, and go from there. Okay, there's no more questions. What I'll do is I'll hang on just for a minute just to make sure no more questions pop in. But otherwise, thank you for your time.